Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review of the 3 episode premiere of The Wheel of Time. And I flip flop back and forth whether to do a review for each episode or kind of like put them all together. And since they kind of put them all together, I'm just going to combine them all into this one video. So that does mean I won't be going as in depth as in an individual one. So there could be some things that I like miss or whatnot, but that doesn't mean I don't want to discuss them. So if there's certain things that I don't hit on, differences wise between like what happens in the book versus what happens in the show, granted it has been a while since I've read the books, feel free to point it out, and I always like to discuss in the comments. So these are the 3 episodes of Leave Taking, Shadows Waiting, and A Place of Safety. So I overall thought that this was a pretty good way to kind of start it off, and it definitely has more of a kind of Lord of the Rings feel to it, which I'm kind of glad because Robert Jordan's kind of stuff is more influenced by Lord of the Rings than like Game of Thrones and whatnot, and I think they just need to kind of find the groove. Now, granted, they did pretty much make mainly like Rand and Egwene kind of annoying as shit. Now, granted, not like that they completely misconstrued the characters or anything like that. It's just how they kind of begin, because your characters have to start in a place of like some kind of place, so that way they can have kind of character growth. So I could definitely see people being annoyed at them for their like relationship stuff, and Rand just acting like an ass in certain instances. But overall, I don't think that they're like bad characters at this point. We're just getting introduced to them, and it's interesting to get the show's kind of feel for them versus the text kind of feel for them. Now, we start off and we pretty much see Egwene going through her rituals to pretty much become a wisdom and all that, which was kind of strange because the CGI for this part really kind of threw me off, because they pretty much like pushed her into the water and she's like floating down this river thing, and it's just really bad CGI where we essentially see like the water flowing and then we see her like CGI head body kind of like pasted onto it, and it's just like that just looks really kind of freaky. But they kind of redeem themselves with the CGI later on in the episode, and we're pretty much just then introduced to like Emond's Field and pretty much our cadre of Teverin. Well, the most part of the beginning we see is that this dude is being chased and he's talking with somebody else, and we see that the Red Aja of the Aes Sedai have popped up and are like, yeah, the power's not meant for you. And people could be like, oh, this is crazy and everything, and it's like, no, that's kind of how the power structures have gone on in the books, and it's interesting that they would go with that kind of route because of the whole kind of history of the one power and the male half and the female half, which, by the way, I do like when we see throughout these episodes certain things of like the yin and yang kind of symbol, black and white thing popping up. That's pretty cool. I always like seeing that kind of thing. But he is a male channeler, and that since that half was tainted by the Dark One, even though we don't have that seen and talked about here, they have to stop him from channeling, otherwise go crazy and break the world, because we get introduced to all that kind of stuff as the whole mythology of the Dragon Reborn, and that the dragon went nuts after they tried to deal with the Dark One. The Dark One tainted that half, he went crazy, broke the world. And we see things of this as we see Moiraine and Lan Mandragoran are like, he's not the one, he's not the Dragon Reborn, as we then see it shifted out and we see what you would normally think would be kind of like mountains and hills and weird kind of things, but we see are kind of like overgrown buildings and shit. So that's an important bit. The breaking of the world was like an apocalyptic thing for like a very advanced civilization that we don't really get into until later on when a lot of other forces are introduced. So yes, I'm kind of sprinkling different kind of things throughout here that are spoilers for the show and the books and all that. So take with that as you will, because it's kind of important to see how these threads are introduced and interweaved throughout here. But it was kind of cool You could be like, hey, these other things have done this before as well, like Shannara Chronicles or whatnot. I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of ones that have done, hey, world went kind of nutty, and then magic got reintroduced, and it's like apocalypse scenario, and then moving back into that kind of thing. It's like, interesting. I like that they kind of played with that. But we see that we're introduced to our people, Egwene, Rand, Perrin, Nynaeve, and Mat. And we see them we see Egwene pretty much trying to come back. We see that it's kind of a festival time, Beltane, yeah, yes. And Tam, Rand's father, they're bringing stuff in and all that. They're talking about how he would go and get berries for Egwene and all that, and figure out what's going on. And because they really had a closeness with each other. And talking about Rand's mother and all that as they're like going down, figuring out how to do everything with the path. We see that everybody's kind of celebrating, and that Egwene's kind of like going around. We see that Rand, Perrin, and Mat are pretty much your typical kind of like friend groups that's grown up and everything. And they're pretty much Mat's a gambler that we get thrown off the bat. That he really doesn't have much and wants to kind of like take care of his sisters, even though his parents are pretty much fucked up. His mom hates his dad for being pretty much an adulterous prick and hates him as an extension, and he tries to take care of his sisters as best he can. I'm like, damn, feel you for that, man. Perrin, for some reason, is married here, even though he wasn't in the books. And that becomes important because they essentially, it's not really much, but they like fridge the shit out of her and like take her out. But granted, I'm halvesies on this. I gotta see how this kind of like works out, because from reading the books, this wasn't kind of an element that was introduced with Perrin at all. So it's gonna change it a little bit. So we'll have to see how that kind of works out. So we see that for some reason she's got jealous tendencies or scared things about Perrin or whatnot. It's really kind of weird. Egwene's pretty much going around like doing stuff for her family's in tavern thing. The mom pretty much like, just leave him to it and everything, and they're talking about their kind of stuff, and of course Rand had a berry for her and everything, and they get down to it. They don't really show anything. We also see that Moiraine and Lan had pretty much asked for a room there and all that. And like, all right, cool, yeah. And I'm like, what the fuck's going on with that? That's important because she's looking for the Dragon Reborn. And the thing is, even in the books, even though the books follow like it being a certain character, there are certain instances with the Wheel of Time with spinning out certain things that it could also be a female as well. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of work with that. Now, since it seems to be that they're following more of the kind of traditional route, it would be kind of weird. And they'll have like certain kind of differences that they would have to go if they did that route. Because one of the main kind of conflicts is that since they're a male channeler in the books, they have to contend with the madness and everything like that going on with that. Whereas I don't know how they could kind of change that up if they did it with a female. Not that, I'm just saying that there would be challenges with it that they'd have to like overcome. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of like shakes out. And we don't get like gratuitous Game of Thrones sex scenes. If it serves the plot, cool. If it doesn't serve the plot, I don't care. You know? Whereas Game of Thrones used it as sex position, where it's like, yes, an info dump with titties or dongs or butts. There. But we're doing that. That's yeah. We see that Moiraine and Lan take a bath, and we see her pretty much using her one power to, of course, increase the temperature of the bath. And they're trying to figure out who it is. They're like, there's like 5 candidates here. We see that Moiraine pretty much goes to kind of talk with Nynaeve to figure out like her power and stuff like that. What's going on with the wisdom, pretty much to figure out her age, because the prophecy has a certain kind of age range going on, and she seems to be just aged out just enough for Moiraine to kind of lose interest in her. And the thing is, when you're a wisdom, you don't get married, and we see that Egwene's pretty much making that choice, and Rand's kind of pissed off about it, but not really. He doesn't want to stop her from doing it, but that means that they can't be together, and that hurts him. And that makes sense, but that also makes him act out in kind of some assholish kind of ways later on. So then we start getting. This is pretty much most of the first part as they're trying to figure stuff out. And then we see that the Trollocs and the Fades pop in because they're looking for the Ta'veren as well, looking for the Dragon Reborn, and all hell breaks loose. This is where the CGI really gets into good effect because I'm like, alright, let's see what these Trolloc things look like. Holy fucking shit! They hit that shit on the head. I'm like, okay, because they're pretty much like Beastmen and fucking terrifying. And I think they did a very good job of power scaling with them. Why do I say that? Because this shit gets almost Dragon Ball levels of like when people are able to like do shit with the one power, where like even a lot of like Trolloc enemies become almost like cannon fodder and almost useless. But the thing is, they balance it out enough where a normal human, you have to deal with a fucking Trolloc, you gonna have to fucking do some shit. And we see, of course, that Rand pretty much went back home with his father, and they were outside, and all hell's kind of breaking loose. Mat tries to keep his sisters safe. Egwene gets freaked out, like, holy shit, Nynaeve pretty much gets dragged off. It's like, what the fuck? And she thinks Nynaeve's dead. And we see that Rand and Tam have to deal with a Trolloc in their house, and Tam takes out his heron-marked sword. That's an important bit for, like, Blade Master stuff. But Rand is able to... It takes a lot of effort for them to kill, like, the one Trolloc. It's like, shit, but Tam got injured by a Trolloc blade and, like, Trolloc poison. That becomes important. Because then we shut down and we start seeing that Moraine's like, I'm gonna deal with this shit. And we start seeing the power of what an Aes Sedai can actually fucking do. And it doesn't disappoint with the CGI either. There are some kind of weird wacky bits, not wacky, kind of wonky bits, where it's like Ariel and we see that Lan is kind of like fighting around. It looks a little bit weird, but not completely bad, as he's pretty much doing his warder's job of protecting Moiraine. And she's, of course, using the one power in various different kind of ways. She does get injured by a Trolloc blade, but then utilizes her power to pretty much, like, take out most of them at once. And we're like, alright. We see that a lot of people have been dead. One unfortunate bit is that we see that Perrin and Layla are in pretty much the forge, and they're fighting, and Perrin pretty much takes one down, but then hears something from behind, and then thinks it's a threat, and accidentally kills Layla. Lila, whichever pronunciation you prefer. And he's like, no. And this will be an interesting kind of bit because we'll have to see how this guilt kind of affects him. Because that sucks. He didn't mean to kill his wife. And we see her die. And the thing is, we get brought up with the whole bit of the Wheel of Time, of cycles of rebirth, death, and what that means. And the thing is, on one hand, that sounds like a good thing. You can try and do a little bit better the next time. The other bit, as we get into episode 3, that also can be deemed as a curse, where you keep getting put into hellacious things again and again and again, and it could be torture for people, because no matter what, you keep going through this fucked up thing, and you can't get out. So it does a good job of showing the kind of balancing effects of the positives and the drawbacks of that. And we see that they light off for Beltane, for those that have been lost and all that. We see Moiraine does heal Tam from the Trolloc. But see, the thing is, we get introduced that Aes Sedai can heal others, but not themselves. Which is interesting, and I would think almost like... Granted, you could be specialized, but I think it would be harder to heal someone like another person rather than yourself, because normally you would be more in tune with your own body. But I understand that limitation because Moiraine is injured, and that then presents the conflict of she needs somebody to fucking heal her before she dies from the Trolloc stuff. So that's pretty much where that one ends. We see that everybody... Well, that's sending off of the things might have happened before the Trolloc hoopla. Sorry, when you binge it all at once, it kind of all runs together sometimes. And granted, I did take a little bit of a break from the first two and then watch the third one, which I think that one was my favorite one so far. So Tam's healed. She's injured, but we don't completely know about it. And they're like, all right, they're coming after you guys. You need to leave here. And we see more Trollocs coming, so they decide to go. Second episode, we are introduced to the White Cloaks. So we are definitely getting a lot of lore and a lot of characters and a lot of organizations introduced. Because we see that the Aes Sedai are women. And they use the One Power and try to fight like the Dark One and how that kind of works out and everything. We are also introduced to the 3 oaths that they take as well in this episode, which is important. We see that there is the White Cloaks that are against, they're called the Children of Light as well, and they are against the Aes Sedai. We have this dude, the Questioner, pretty much burning an Aes Sedai at the stake, and that, oh yeah, sometimes mercy requires brutality. I'm like, the fuck? And he just sits there drinking his drink as this woman burns. It's like, god damn. So it shows that there's a lot of crazy shit going on. Now granted, you could compare that to Game of Thrones, but it's got more fantasy elements involved and other kind of things as well. And there's a lot of different kind of things that have different kind of politics. So even though Game of Thrones really opened it up there for fantasy politics, this one definitely has its own kind of things going on, as we've got to get people together to fight the Dark One. And even though these people support the light, they do it in fucked up kind of ways. So you're like, all right. Then we see that everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. Rand is distrustful of Moiraine because as they were escaping on a ferry, this one dude wanted to wait for his son, and we find out that Trollocs can't cross deep water, so they just like, we're going now, whatever. Oh, we'll wait for my son. It's like, if there's Trollocs following us, your son's probably fucked and eaten, because we saw that shit before. And us waiting is not going to really kind of help that matter. As they got to the other side, and he's like, just let me go over for my son. I'm like, yeah, and then they can come over here. It's really kind of weird. I understand that they're trying to paint it as Moiraine being hard-hearted and everything like that, and that she killed this dude when she really didn't, because she like sent the ferry out and then had it pretty much whirlpool down into some water. The old man's like, no. I'm like, because all those Trollocs were lined up there, and I'm like, what were you going to do when you got over there? Like, those Trollocs were going to kill you and eat you, most likely. And your son was probably already killed and eaten. Like, granted, I would try and find my kid as well. But if I saw all those motherfuckers standing over there, as we had seen a Trolloc push forward and drown in the water, I'd be like, they're not going to let you off. They are going to kill you. Are you going to fight and kill them all? Can you? No. So, I understand what they're trying to do and show that for, like, the Emmons Field people that were following, but I'm just like, really? I'd almost have to go to them and be like, listen, that dude was going to be dead, man. There's nothing he could have done. But that's an important bit to show Rand being like, I don't know what her objectives are. Now, granted, he goes about this in, like, pretty much an immature ass kind of way. And the biggest kind of issue, I think, is that I think the most problematic thing we're going to get with this is that they're doing this in 8 episodes. And there are a lot of people that need a lot of focus and attention to developing them that I don't know if we're going to completely get. They handle it well enough in these 3 episodes, but they kind of needed a little bit more with Rand to be like, I'm not liking this shit. This is kind of freaky, and I don't trust this Moiraine chick. Whereas Egwene is like the counterbalancing point, being like trying to be as reasonable as possible and calling him an ass. And of course, they have their relationship stuff. He's like, yeah, I know you're gonna be wisdom. And that I can never hate you. It's just he's trying to deal with his feelings of he's never gonna be with her, and that Moiraine wants to get them to the White Tower to figure out what's going on and get away from the Trollocs. It's like, yeah, they ain't gonna. They'd have to get ballsy as fuck to attack the seat of power, the Aes Sedai. Perrin's dealing with pretty much him killing his wife, and Matt's trying to like broker peace. Pretty much like, yeah, she can shoot fireballs and shit. I'm gonna be fucking going with her. I mean, granted, she could probably toast my ass, but she's toasting those motherfuckers pretty well, so let's do that. And it's like, yeah, another good point. Well, they then all start having their dreams of Baal-Zamon, Aishamel, the champion of the Dark One. We'll see that kind of evolve, but he's trying to figure out who the Dragon Reborn is. We see that Rand has a dream where he fucking pukes out a bat. That was fucking weird. But all of them had dreams about that, of course, the shadowy figure with embers for eyes, and that was pretty well done. I kind of like that. And we also see that Perrin gets introduced to the wolves. They're licking his wound. I'm like, okay, cool. That's important to his character because of his connection with wolves. So they pretty much try to figure out what to do. Egwene pretty much gets introduced that she's able to channel the one power. Though granted, it's kind of weird where it's like, Marie's like, oh, you thought you listened to the wind? No, the wind listens to you. I'm like, what? That didn't, like, I kind of get that. Channeling wise and everything like that. Probably like the wind maybe giving her information, but it just didn't feel like that when her and Nynaeve were talking about the wind doing the stuff with the Trollocs. They also run into the Children of Light, the White Cloaks, and she's like, yeah, I'm kind of injured and everything. They're able to lie their way through, even though she told them about, like, not lying, speak only the truth, make no weapon to harm another, so on and so forth, with the oaths, and that Egwene's like, how do you do that? It's like, it's truth to him. Okay. It's like, yeah, because the Aes Sedai really have to be careful with how they say things and everything, because you cannot break the oaths. That's an important thing with those kind of oaths, with the things that they're able to do, as we'll get into later on in the series. Get introduced to that stuff. They pretty much get cornered by the Trollocs to a point where they have to go to Shadar Logoth, and that's an important place because we had been introduced to this one song of Menetheren, which is where Emond's Field was, and that they were a place that was pretty much attacked by the Trolloc War, and they were supposed to hold out for 3 days as help would occur, and it didn't. They kept fighting and fighting, but were pretty much taken down, and the Queen, in her sorrow, unleashed all the one power that she could, and wiped them out, but were able to protect the children enough for them to, like, eventually reestablish themselves a little bit. Shadar Logoth was one of those people that was supposed to help them, but they sealed all the gates, and when they were able to break through one time, everybody was gone. And this is kind of like a third kind of element that's like in opposition. It's like a thing that you would think would be allied with the Dark One, but it's like, I don't fucking give a shit. Like, it's what the fuck? Because Moiraine can't do much. She's pretty much in and out because of the Trolloc poison. And Lan's like, I don't know what the fuck else to do, and the Trollocs aren't coming at him, so they go in, and Lan's like, touch nothing, and they're trying to find all the kind of stuff. Rand and Egwene kind of get a little bit better. It's like, what the hell is kind of going on? He's able to find this dagger, which becomes pivotal to him, and we see that this kind of entity pops up from Shadar Logoth, Mashadar, I think. But it, like, fucking dusts a horse, and I'm like, we gotta get the fuck out of here! And they get separated. So we pretty much have Mat and Rand, Egwene and Perrin, and Lan and Moiraine split in 3 different directions. And they did a pretty good job using CGI to do this kind of crazy-ass effect, as we see that Egwene and Perrin pretty much jump off a wall. Mat and Rand pretty much get out this kind of window thing, and Lan's able to kind of like work on a horse as they're trying to figure out where they're at, and they're like, shit, damn. As the episode ends, we see that Nynaeve pops up and like, where the fuck are my people? And it's like, ah, shit. Oh, one good positive. There was never at any point was the embroidery of someone's dress fucking mentioned. I know that sounds weird, but I kind of have PTSD from that kind of shit where it's like, how many times do I have to be told what the embroidery is? So, even though their costuming's great, I'm just like, thank God. Let us see it, and we're good. Sorry, I know that's random, but it's like, alright, cool. And then that's pretty much where the second episode ends. And then we get into the third one, which I like the most at this point, because then we start kind of moving and grooving, and we essentially have three distinct plots going on, but for some reason it seems kind of tighter to me and kind of more focused on certain characters or whatnot. Because we get Matt and Rand doing their stuff, Egwene and Perrin doing their stuff, and Lan, Moiraine, and Nynaeve doing their stuff. As we get also introduced to stuff going on at the back end, that'll be important. Who do we want to talk about first? Yes, let's do that kind of that way. Let's go with Egwene and Perrin first, then Nynaeve, Lan, and Moiraine, and then Rand and Matt. So, Egwene and Perrin are kind of figured out their stuff. Perrin, of course, is having dreams and shit, kind of linked with Baalzamon and the wolves and everything. Definitely heavily seeding the world of dreams that's very important in the Wheel of Time. Tel'aran'rhiod. I think. Pronunciation will be kind of fucky, so I'll see kind of where they kind of go with it in the show. But we didn't see it vaguely important, but we saw it enough. I'm like, okay, yes, do these things. So they're pretty much getting chased by wolves a lot, and I'm like, oh, okay, let's kind of see where this is going. Now, granted, it had been a while, so I didn't know if they were going to the setting yet or what, if they're introducing another character, but they pretty much got into the Tinkers, who are pretty much a roving band of nomadic pacifists, and they're looking for this song. And we only get that much of a bit in there, and we also see that Perrin's trying to protect her as much as possible. It's okay, Perrin, it's okay, as he's still traumatized with what happened with his wife. And I did like how the Tinkers were kind of represented, as they asked if they knew the song and whatnot, and of course Aram pops up and is like, hey, tell me you don't know, okay? Because it's an answering kind of call effect, and if you're not used to the answering call effect, you kind of need to know what it is. And it was kind of cool as they're like, welcome, give them food and everything as they chow down really much, and the Aram dude's like, yeah, okay, we're gonna help you guys. Now I know it's a kind of a little bit different in the books, because I think that Perrin was a little bit more trying to figure out what's going on first, but they're just pretty much like, oh, thank God, we're okay. The wolves aren't chasing us, even though it seemed like the wolves weren't actually going to harm them, because they were kind of more in tune with Perrin because of his connection with him, and was just pretty much trying to push him to something that actually help him. And an important bit is she was thinking that Rand would go home, but Perrin's like, no, he would go wherever you would, which would be more to the White Tower. And it's kind of cool to see that Perrin is that kind of sharper focused kind of person that he is in the books. So that's kind of where their stuff parts out. Nynaeve is just like, I'm not healing Moiraine, screw that shit. And Lan's trying to get her to talk to him about how the fuck she tracked him, because he is one of the preeminent kind of people from it's not easy to track his ass. Alright, so if you're able to do that, you got some shit. And she's like, fuck her. And he's like, listen, she can't heal herself, and she needs somebody to heal her. I was like, fine, cool. And of course, we do get a little bit of how she got away. There was an injured Trolloc, and then the Trolloc that took her is like, I'm gonna eat this motherfucker. Does it. She's able to kind of run away to the sacred kind of pool that she was cleaning in the first episode. She kind of hides in it and is able to fight his ass and pretty much stab him and have him die, and of course through the water that kind of works out to the yin and yang kind of thing. I'm like, cool. So we know that Nynaeve can do some shit. And granted, she is also a wisdom, and in tune with the One Power, but she doesn't know how to use it like an Aes Sedai does. And she tries to, of course, utilize her herbology and stuff like that to kind of like heal Moiraine. It doesn't kind of work. So they're like, well, we got to kind of get to a place where an Aes Sedai would be, and that kind of leads them to Liandrin, who we'd seen in the first episode, and some other colored Aja Aes Sedai as well, because Moraine's the blue one that we've seen so far. Liandrin is the red. They all have their different kind of purposes. The one that we've seen in the episode 2 that was killed in the beginning was of the yellow Aja. And we see some other ones as well. Like, what? We caught Logain, who was calling himself the Dragon Reborn, as that kind of stuff going on war-wise. And we see him, like, shacked up. And that's kind of where the episode ends. It's like, oh, shit. Have to see how that kind of goes out, because Logain is an important character throughout this as well. So it's like, oh, right. We see everything kind of going on. The best bits, for me, not that I didn't like the other ones, but like my favorite ones deal with Rand and Mat as they're trying to figure out what's going on, and Mat's like, let's just go home. And it's like, no. Egwene would go to the White Tower. It's like, fine, all right. And they're walking there. Mat's complaining about being cold. He's like, oh, yes, throughout this whole trip, you've been chilly. So let's kind of just go. They find this town. We see that somebody is hanging in a cage. Mat looks at the purple stones like, all right, fine. And he's like, so they get into town. They pretty much get into the tavern bar to kind of see what's going on. And we get introduced to the Glee Man, Tom Merrilin. And this was pretty cool. He pretty much singing a song about the breaking of the world. More linked to the dragon, Lews Therin Telamon. And it's actually pretty cool. It's like, alright, cool. I'm like, usually I would have thought of Tom as like older, but they did pretty good here. I'm like, alright, let's see how this works. Of course, he starts solicitations of like donations to the Glee Man. We see that Mat gets his purse pinched by him, but not Rand, as there's like, hey, listen, let's try and get some food, figure out what's going on, try and get some lodging as well. And Rand's like, hey, we'll do some work and shit. He's like, alright, cool, yeah, we'll do this. And you'd think that the barkeep one would be okay. It's like, but nah. We see them, we see Rand pretty much chopping wood and everything, doing that. And it's like, yeah, I'm not into this. And she pretty much uses him to, like, do beer, running out and everything like that. He's like, hey, what about stealing or what? It's like, yeah, I'll do whatever I have to get back home because of his sisters. And she's like, yeah, you don't want to steal if you don't want to end up in one of those cages or whatnot. I was like, alright. And she goes out and sees that Rand has like chopped all this wood and everything. Yeah, I let your dude off like an hour ago. What the fuck's going on with him? Talking about how they've got their problems and everything like that. But then she's pretty much locked him in this kind of room until somebody comes, and she's like utilizing the Heron Mark sword that Rand has. It's like, holy shit. But the thing is, he's a ta'veren. ta'veren. ta'veren? Is that how I think that's how the show pronounces it. ta'veren. And he like busts down through this door, and then that's when his stuff intersects with Mat again. And Mat had pretty much went out to the person in the cage, and Tom's like, what are you doing out here, boy? He's like, I was thinking of pretty much taking that stone because Dead Man doesn't need it anymore. He's like, yeah. And the thing is, he came out here to bury the dude because they were an Aiel. And Aiel's an important group of people within the Wheel of Time series. So it's like, ooh, okay. And it's really kind of cool because, granted, this isn't an info dump, but it's done in a very good way, in my opinion, because a Glee Man's like a bard, talking about the customs of the Aiel. How it's like, they pretty much killed him because he was different. That's all. Because you rarely see that color hair outside of the Threefold Land. Why is this important? Because this is the same color hair that Rand has. Plot thickening, even though I've already read the stories and shit. But it becomes important, which I'm like, huh, okay. He's like, yeah, if he was a threat, he'd have been veiled. When that's up, that's when trouble ensues. But no. And he's like, yeah, do what you need to. He looked around and he's able to get the stone and other kind of stuff. He's like, I'm sorry, but my sisters need me. And of course, Tom kind of hears it and everything. He's like, yeah, you got what you can from him. At least you can do is bury him. Of course, they bury him, and that's kind of where it intersects with Rand's story, but I like how they're able to introduce the lore and everything like that, because it is there's a crazy amount of lore and everything. It's not that this is not unadaptable. It's just how you need to adapt it and how you need to adapt the lore and everything that's going on, because you can refer to appendices and stuff like that, and like other books as well, to get certain information when you're reading it. Whereas here, you have to figure out what you have to prioritize as the most important present plot, and then what you need to kind of wrap in for things in the future, so that way you understand what's going on. And so far, I think this show is doing that pretty well. Now, let's see. Yes. Granted, it could become unwieldy at some point, but I'm liking kind of what they're doing. My only problem is that the characters are making stupid decisions, but that's hindsight. As you're like, well, hindsight and new in her eyes as well, eyes and ears. But the thing is, it gets better because they do grow, and you see them get better, you see them get worse, you see what different kind of changes happen on. So I hope people still kind of give it a chance, because I do understand it, and I do like, ooh, Rand, you're being kind of stupid, but I kind of liked how he's like, listen, I want to protect my friends, I want to help my friends, and I want to see them again, because home's not home without them, kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, it's. I really liked when he said that. I'm like, yeah, I get that, man. And the thing is, they do a good enough job of like being like, okay, I understand why he's acting like this, even though he's acting like a dillweed. Yeah, and same with the other characters as well. Egwene wants to do what's best for her, but she knows what's best for her is going to hurt the one she loves. And those kind of things, and those kind of conflicts, and those kind of balancing acts, I like a show that kind of deals with that kind of stuff. So we'll have to see how that works out. Now, of course, we'd seen the whole Aiel thing. It's like, all right, cool. We're learning about these people. We're learning about how they're some of the best warriors, and that people are being assholes and dillholes and fucking killed one of them just because they were different. So it sets up how people view them and interact with them, and what's kind of going on here, and how that could kind of be important as the show progresses. Well, we see that Rand's like, shit, Matt, fucking help me. As granted, it's gonna sound funny when I describe this, but Rand's fucking running through this little town with this tavern lady wielding a fucking katana, running after his ass. Now, granted, whoever stunt choreographed this shit, hats off to you, because you gotta figure out how to make it safe to run with a katana like that, because she's running pretty book ass quick, and Rand's like, fucking shit, this lady's coming for my ass. And then that's like, what the fuck's going on? She got a sword. And then it doesn't come off that comedic, but when you're describing it, it's like, oh god, that don't fucking work right. And they're pretty much giving her the runaround. It's like, that's when we start getting the kind of diving into the other stuff. It's like, yeah, I've just seen your faces in my dreams and everything. And it's like, the wheel, we keep all getting spun out doing these things, and I'm stuck here, and other people are stuck here, but I want out. And that's why she's a dark friend, and why she's trying to help the dark one, because that'll stop the wheel. That's like, but if the dark one won, the wheel would have already been stopped. So, and it would have been spread out throughout the whole thing. It's like, interesting. But then, out of nowhere, we see the daggers that, of course, Tom had before that we had seen. One of them going through her throat. He's like, yeah, she's a dark friend. He's like, why'd you do that? She's a dark friend, and she's fucking around. I'm like, really, man? As we, of course, see her bleed and everything. Like, you're welcome to fucking stay here, but Trollocs and Fades and shit are probably coming here. It's like, alright, yeah, I'm gonna go with Ilya, man. I'm gonna go with that badass motherfucker. And they get their shit in book. Of course, Rand gets his sword back. And they're like, alright. Because at first they're like, I don't know you. You're kind of like, I mean, granted, you can tune out pretty good, and he has had good interactions with Matt, but Rand hasn't had that much interaction with him, other than, this badass motherfucker who just fucking, dagger shit. I'm like, alright, let's see how this kind of goes. So I'm interested to see how these interactions work out, because so far I'm liking Matt's actor. He really kind of fits it. Perrin works very well. I'm happy with Egwene. Nynaeve works out very well as well. I'm liking the casting for pretty much all of them. Tom really hits it, though, and really did a good job in this episode. Moiraine works as well, though for some reason I thought she'd be, whenever I picture Moiraine, I think of her shorter. Not like a really small person, but just like, I always get little sister, older sister kind of vibes from her for some reason. I don't know. Not that she's bad or anything. She works very well in understanding with the smarts and intelligence of Moiraine and how she's able to get out of situations and everything like that. Lan, at first I'm like, all right, we'll see how this kind of works out. And then seeing him in motion and seeing him talk with Nynaeve and all the other characters, he works very well. So overall, I'm really happy with this so far. It'll be interesting to see how it keeps going. Because there's definitely going to be the balancing acts of juggling all of these characters. And 8 episodes is... it's going to be harder with that. I don't like the whole trend of them making shorter and shorter episode counts and trying to fit like an ungodly fucking amount of people and plots into these things. Wheel of Time, I would think at least 13 episodes a season to kind of have breathing room. But for me, I'd go like 16 or whatnot. Granted, I understand that the opportunity for filler and just plot thinning to the point where it's like, it's stretched too thin, Jim. Or you just fucking like fill with so much stupid bullshit or whatnot. Or filler would pop up. I get that. But the other effect is that you still have a shortened thing that you can't get through the things in enough time, and you somehow can still end up with filler. I've had short seasons of certain shows that for some reason you have like 6 episodes and I've got like filler coming out my ass. What? So I hope that they look at the episode counts. I understand this budget means that they're like, this cost a fuck ton of money, so we're only getting these many episodes. I'm like, I get that this shit costs a lot. But sometimes, in order to deliver the quality product that the people deserve, you have to, like, figure out the best kind of length for the story. So that's my biggest kind of worry at this point, that they don't give each season enough breathing room. Now, as long as if they do 8 episodes and it's essentially like they would have to go to another season to truly finish out all the book stuff, which to be honest with how the episodes are titled, I don't think that's going to happen. I would be okay with that, but the thing is, you've got to do the length that the story can kind of work out. So I'm okay at this point, but we'll kind of have to see how it kind of works out, because granted, there are certain things in the Wheel of Time that you can cut. I mean, shit. I read one book, and it was like 10 or 11, and fuck all, nothing happened, except to the end. And I'm like, I've never read a book where I could essentially be like, nothing happened, I don't need to read this, and just read the last page. It's like, what? Ugh. So, there are things that they could, like, streamline story-wise, so we'll see kind of how they're able to handle it. But what I recommend is the Wheel of Time fans, yes, I think it's a pretty good, interesting adaptation, and we'll see what kind of liberties and stuff that they take, because the thing is, since it is the Wheel of Time and things kind of can change, adaptations can have differences, since it could essentially be a new reincarnation of the same thing. So, kind of like what the Dark Tower movie failed at. Because the Dark Tower movie attempted to do that kind of thing, story-wise, and it could have worked, but for oh fuck, they couldn't execute that with a shit. Here, I have a better feeling on that. So, Wheel of Time fans, definitely. People that are interested in fantasy, I think you would be very well met with this, because it's got good, evil, more kind of the line in Tolkien. If you're looking for Game of Thrones, which was more focused on in the beginning, human versus human conflicts, this is not going to be your kind of thing. So I wouldn't recommend it in that case. It's like also there wouldn't be the sexiness that you probably want with everything going on, and people don't die. Well, sometimes they die randomly, but not to the like randomness that like would be known with the Game of Thrones kind of stuff. So, and I would definitely not recommend this to little children because, for the love of fuck, if you want to nightmare fuel them and that's your objective, you fucked up. Don't do that, asshole. This will nightmare fuel the fucking shit out of the kid, man. If they're used to this kind of stuff and like the blood, the guts, and the gore, because there's blood, guts, and gore in this, man, and one ass, tub ass from Landman Dragoran, but that's about it. Yes. So, I'm good with this, and I'll definitely recommend it. So those are my opinions on the first 3 episodes. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.